Grace Dafoe, welcome to Hobby of a Lifestyle. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to learning about your journey. Grace, for listeners, do you just want to tell them what your sport, your hobby, your passion is?
It's funny because I like the hobby word in your podcast name because skeleton is my hobby. I'm not a full-time professional athlete, but yeah, so I'm a Canadian skeleton athlete. So
Wow.
skeleton is head first tobogganing, going up to 140 kilometers an hour, just you and the ice, and your chin is just inches off the ice. And um it's it's very serendipitous how I got involved in it as an adult now, but I actually was a figure skater growing up, self-described mediocre figure skater. I was not very good. And just basically, when I started, there was no way to really find these like transfer sports. And now a lot of these organizations are coming up with, in Canada, we have RBC Training Ground. And so they like identify athletes and then try to find like a second or third career path for them in
Right.
sport.
Okay.
That didn't exist when I was around. So I literally just Googled what sports can I start when I'm 18? And skeleton turned out to be on the short list. So here I am 12 years later.
Wow.
I've raced in 70 international races. I just made my World Cup debut in January, just a few months
Wow.
ago, and I'm the Canadian bronze medalist in March of 2024.
Wow. I mean, congratulations. To start something, as you say, maybe later on, after you, it's not a sport. Obviously, you were involved with winter sports and figure skating and whatnot, but where does the skills transfer, I suppose, from that to what you're doing now? I think it's testament to you as an individual and as probably as a competitor and an athlete that you've been able to transition into, let's be honest, a very, very different sport.
Yeah, very, very different. I mean, they both involve ice. That's really
That's
where
about
the
as far as it goes.
commonality ends.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll go back to childhood. You grew up in Calgary, is that right?
Yeah, Calgary, Canada. So for international users, I always say we're the closest airport to Banff, and Banff is quite a popular tourist
Yeah.
destination. So that's the best way to think of where we are in Western Canada.
Okay, okay. So closest airport to Banff, and I'm assuming. Well, I'm not assuming. I kind of know you get cold weather up in Calgary.
Yeah, it gets pretty cold, but it's up and down.
Yeah.
It'll be really cold and then it'll get warm again. But yeah,
Okay.
it's minus 30 for about
It's
a few weeks a year.
it's extremely cold. Extremely cold. I suppose that lends itself to winter sports more than it does in other countries. I look at the UK, for instance, and we just tend to have like a really bad autumn slash winter, and then it doesn't really get any better than that. Our summer's never that great. Certainly not at the moment. Um, but I'm assuming, was that one of the reasons you got into figure skating as a child because you had access, I suppose, because of the weather as well?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a community. It's quite popular here in at least Calgary. I can't speak to other cities that we have communities that have like outdoor lakes, and then so they freeze over in the winter obviously, and so it's only accessible to those in the community.
Yeah.
So I grew up in one that had this big lake, and the lake froze, but then they also had an upper concrete rink that froze over in the winter.
Oh,
And
wow.
my brother started skating pretty early. My dad played hockey, like not just for fun and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. But I just remember wanting to skate from like literally the moment I could walk. So I think I was 2 years old out on the outdoor rink with those little two blades that strap
Ah,
over your
yeah, yeah.
snow boots. And pretty much from there, I'm like, yeah, I want to learn to skate. And
Wow.
very, very lucky that obviously we have lots of rinks in
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Canada. So it turned into taking skating lessons. We call it can skate here in Canada. Um, at actually a rink that was a practice rink for the 1988 Olympics. So very much
Okay.
a lot of our sport facilities are 88 Olympic legacy.
Wow.
Obviously we've built lots of rinks also,
Yeah,
but that was part of it. It's just it was so accessible. And I can't speak to like why I chose it because I literally chose it from before I can remember, but I
yeah,
just always wanted to skate. And so that's obviously why what it turned into. And obviously winter sport has a big legacy in Canada as well.
yeah.
So like
Massive.
it's so ingrained in our culture that I think it was just like, oh, you're gonna learn to skate, whether it's hockey or figure skating, you're gonna learn one of them
Yeah.
essentially.
And it's funny that obviously from someone who doesn't come from that environment or doesn't have access to those facilities, whether it be indoor or outdoor, you say mediocre figure skater, and I often wonder, I'm wondering now, mediocre compared to people that live in Calgary who have access to all these ice rink facilities, compared to someone who's maybe is mediocre over here in the UK, where I can think of within probably within 50 miles of each, I can maybe think of two ice rinks,
Oh my
50
gosh.
miles apart. Yes, we have very little access.
Okay.
So our mediocre might be very different to how you're describing yourself.
Okay, I will preface it then. If someone's listening, they're a figure skater fan or they figure skated. I did up to my double axel, so I attempted triples, but I never fully landed all my triple jumps. But I really only competed in Western Canada, so like in your area, like within a couple 100 kilometers. So I say mediocre, but yeah, I did do it for 14 years and compete.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I never made it to nationals or like that kind of higher echelon of it, if I may say that. So if
So
anyone's listening, then
can
that's my context.
yeah, yeah. So can I ask then? You're talking there about you competed, but and just to use your word, you describe yourself as a mediocre, but you were competing. What, where was the drive to become a national athlete? Was that always there when you were competing? So when you're doing your figure skating, and excuse me if this is blunt, but did you know where your ceiling was? Had you reached your ceiling with figure skating, but still love to compete and push yourself?
Yeah, so because figure skating is similar to gymnastics, like you kind of know when you're 10, 11, 12, like if your trajectory is up here or if it's gonna, plateau a little
Of
bit.
course.
And I figured that out, right, like with the help of obviously my coaches. And like I saw some of my competitors, going upwards quite quickly, and me kind of flatlining in a sense. But I just loved it. And like I think it was a way to be involved with something outside of school. I think I was also liked that it made me unique. Like people are involved in school sports, but like that I did this cool thing outside and I was traveling to competitions and like all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff which probably is foreshadowing from why I got into skeleton, but it's something unique. But yeah, I guess like really like my best friends were there. Like it was such a good community. And I ended up with a really great coach from when I was like 14 on that not to say my other coaches weren't, but this coach really like was like, you're here for the love of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big piece in my athlete journey is like I'm not in it for the accolades. I'm in it for the personal development and
Yeah.
the journey and the stories and all this kind of stuff. So I really practiced that in my last 4 years of figure skating. I really feel like because I knew I wasn't gonna make the national team and
Yeah.
go on to be what I wanted to be. I've been obsessed with the Olympics since I was a kid. And
I was reading
so
your bio, yeah, and I said was it the lady who won in Switzerland? No, it was it Switzerland, the Olympics? In
so there's a few. I could pick out so many. In 2002, I remember them rolling the cart into my classroom and we watched the
wow.
Canadian women's hockey team beat the States in the gold medal game. And while we were like coloring or something like that. And then also obviously loved the figure skating. And we had actually an Olympian then from my figure skating rink that went to
Wow.
Vancouver 2010. So like that was also a piece of it. I was 16 and I watched Vancouver 2010. I watched like every hour that I could of it because it was in the same time zone. We were very lucky. And that's when I like one of the first times I remember like seeing skeleton and like taking it in. John Montgomery won gold for Canada, um, which was really exciting. And that was kind of like Vancouver 2010 opened my eyes to other sports that are possible. I think like it was really the time because it was so well broadcast in Canada, that I was like, oh, there are other sports out there that like I can do. And then
Yeah.
I started Googling which ones I could do. But I've just loved the Olympics since I was a kid. And both my parents are sports fans. They didn't play high level sports by any means themselves, but like we grew up watching all the major tennis tournaments, and like that kind of stuff. My dad
Yeah. Yeah.
like to watch golf, and I just feel like my brother played hockey up until high school. We were just like very much into watching sports. We watched
Yeah.
Stanley Cup every year, quintessential Canadian. But like I'm just a big sucker for sports fan. So like the Olympics are like my prime time. So I
Are we
really feel like
talking
that's like
Summer Olympics or Winter Olympics though?
So I remember watching War or Winter, but since I've in the last like a few Olympic cycles, I have definitely gotten involved more with watching the summer
Yeah,
and just more so like getting even the past few weeks getting to watch and like watch athletes, live out their dreams and then some don't and how they respond and like all this kind of stuff. I think it's just so I can relate even though I haven't been to the Olympics yet, but like how difficult the athlete journey is and like how much you really have to go for it. So it's pretty cool to watch athletes. And I in the Summer Olympics, I really don't have like a sport preference. I'm just like here for all the good
yeah,
sports
of course.
stories. So
Yeah. Yeah, there's been some fantastic ones come out of the ones that have just finished, and I must admit I'm just equally as excited for the Paralympics that starts in a couple of weeks as well. Can't wait for those neither. Um, right, so we're talking about, and I love it. By the way, I've got three little girls, so I tell them very regularly that, and it sounds very much. Some of the things that you're telling me is I always want them to have a hobby because it's a social outlet as well. If things aren't maybe going well at school, they've got a different social circle, but also that competition element of it. It's kind of, well, life is a competition. If you're going for a job, you're against people, you're going to win or lose. And I'm going to put it out there. I'm not one of those ones who's giving medals out for taking part, or I don't really agree with that. I think there's certain times for it, but no, when it comes to competition, you're there to win. So, and the girls understand that, not in a pushy dad way, by the way, just so I get that out there, but you have to have that element. It sounds like you've always had that, but maybe it really kicked in when you transitioned sports, and I'm finding this really, really interesting. So you talk about that. Why did figure skating end, and how did skeleton of all things present itself? I know you said you researched something, but there must have been a reason you were researching that.
yeah, and I mean it's interesting because I feel like my parents were very similar to what you're describing because they were hard on me, but they weren't like pushy about the results
Yeah,
side, but they just want like my mom sat me down, I remember so vividly. It's probably like 10, 11, or 12, and she's like, if you're not putting the effort in, like I can only match your effort essentially. Like I can't want this more than you.
yeah,
But she goes, if you decide to like, I see you trying your best, like we're gonna go all out. We're gonna get you the skating dresses, the
yeah,
music,
yeah,
the like to see how far you can really take it. And so like to me, that was such a vote of confidence that even though I wasn't like the most talented, um, they could obviously clearly see that I was like liked it and was putting my heart and soul
yeah.
into it. So that was a big wake up call. In terms of like that I can't just continue to skate by, excuse my pun, but like,
I know it's
like
right.
they're like, you can go be any recreational athlete you want and go into me, but this is a competitive sport and you're choosing this. So like get ready. And so I feel like that is like a big primer of my athlete journey from there. Um, yeah, I mean, figure skating, it also, when you do something for so long, especially like an early sport, you find this more in early sports specialization tends to lead to burnout later. And so I remember at 18, I was gonna, and there's a lot in this story here, but I'll try to sum it up. But so I was 18, trying to pick a university to go to. And I had picked one out on the East Coast, like far East Coast of Canada. And I was like, I found a local figure skating club. I was like, I'm going to transfer there, paid my deposits. And about 6 weeks before university began, I'm like, I'm not going there. And my parents are like, and my dad brought this up in my wedding speech. 15 months ago. He's like, if anyone wants to go to KD University, I probably still have $1,000 credit sitting there. Um, but it kind of, and there's a lot of reasons why, personal reasons why. I just wanted to say, I felt like I just had this thought. I was like, I need to be home. And so I decided not to go and applied on a whim to a university here in Calgary and got in. It was a transfer program, so it was meant to be 2 years, and then you transfer on to a bigger university. And during that time, I actually then started volunteering up at Winsport, which is the Canada Olympic Park, which was where all the 1988
Yeah.
facilities were. I had only just started going up there in my last year of figure skating. They opened 4 brand new rinks up there, and I was figure skating up there. And it was kind of the first time I grew up on the other end of the city that I had like seen this Olympic legacy kind of thing. And
Well,
it did open my eyes to like, you're like, hey, what's that up there? it's the
Yeah.
skeleton track. And like all this kind of stuff. And so then I ended up volunteering, learned to skate there. And spending my time just like deciding what I really wanted to do with my life and, whether education, job. So I was still working during university because I was trying to figure it out. But it basically turned into me working at the gym up there and then being surrounded by Olympic athletes. And then there's this other piece where my dad knew someone through the working world whose son was on the Sochi Olympic team
Wow.
for skeleton. But he had, so this was a few years before, this was right around in 2010, 2011. I guess late 2011, if to put it, is really where it like went into play that he's like, hey, my daughter's like really interested in sliding sports. And I think I was just interested in trying something different. I had taken some time away from skating and being not active. And I was like, I just really need to get back to doing something active. And so, yeah, he got the information on how to try skeleton. They had like this passport to sport where you could go try any sport up a wind sport. And the local skeleton association was running one. So I showed up on January 2nd, 2012. And John Montgomery is there, the Olympic gold medal winner. And I'm like, and he like looks up at me and goes, I think you have a good body type for skeleton. And I was like, oh, okay, this is promising. And so I tried it. I wouldn't say I loved it at first, but it was so intriguing. Like it's just something you can't describe what it feels like. And from there, I
What's that
decided to
first
just
session
like,
look like? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm
yeah,
thinking
no,
that
go ahead.
you're talking about trying something there, and what does that first session look like? Is it literally you're going down a straight track and you're staying within grooves just to get and have a go at something, or are they kind of going, we're going to take a quarter of the way up here and you're going for it?
So the first one you described, like with the grooves, we do have a push facility that you can like learn to push on,
Yeah.
and it's got grooves all the way down. That's what we use now
Right.
at because the track is closed now in Calgary. But when I started, they just took you up. We called it tour start. It was from corner 12, and or corner 11. There was 14 corners, so you really only got up to 50 kilometers an hour. They literally said, lay there, keep your arms in, don't do anything. That's where you're safest. And then you can sign up to do like an actual school. And then so you did like, they took you up the track a little bit further, for 2 days. And then on the third day, they would push you off the top with a broom and basically say good luck. And like hope that you've learned everything. We obviously had lots of like safety seminars and like, here's what to do, here's how the track process is and like stuff like that. But the first day you sign a waiver, they push you off a few times from corner 11 and you go through 4 corners and you get to the bottom and you're like, what just happened? Like, so yeah, like really there's no other way to try it other than doing it. There's no way to simulate skeleton, really.
And somebody must have saw early on in that someone's already talked about kind of the body shape and said, you've got the figure for this. Going through that process, did somebody go, there's a talent
They were
there?
just taken, like anyone could have showed up on that day and paid I can't remember how much it was. Maybe it was free,
Right.
but anyone could have showed up as long as you didn't have neck or back problems and you weren't over like 250 pounds. They were like sending anyone down. So,
Right.
yeah, most tracks have public programs that like really anyone can try. So this was just a part of that. And
Okay.
yeah, so no one really primed it. It wasn't until I took the like school, like the proper school, that they were really explaining like the depth in the current women's program and what my opportunities might look like. They're like, you're young, you're female, and you're interested, come into our program. Basically, because women's skeleton really is fairly, I don't want to say it's fairly new, but it's new in the Olympic program. Men's skeleton has been around for a lot longer, even though it wasn't in the Olympic program. It really feels like women's skeleton took a bit longer to develop. So
I suppose I think about it here in the UK, and I remember my eldest is 2014. So I'm going to say maybe 2018, maybe. Would that have been the Winter Olympics 2018?
Yep.
It would have been. So Lizzie Arnold won.
Yep. She's a double Olympic gold medalist. She won 20. Yeah.
And I remember my daughter just being infatuated watching it, and she had me outside when it snowed here in the UK, and I'm pulling her along on her sledge, and she's pretending to be Lizzie Arnold in her sledge, and so I can imagine that had a major spike because obviously there was a big focus on her being a British athlete. It got well publicized in the media. I can imagine there was a big spike in young women and girls over here in the UK going, how do I try? I mean, I still don't know how you do it over here in the UK, but it was like, I can imagine those who have access or understand it a little bit better really push themselves into that.
Yeah, you guys have a really strong women's program, and the men are really coming up too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the women have won like something like 6 or 7 Olympic medals
That's
since
really good.
2002,
Yeah,
and all but one gold medal in the women's
yeah.
side. Like the 2022 was the first time I think there it was a non-British winner. I could be wrong. Maybe 2002 was American, but anyways, in recent years
Mm,
it's been all Laura Dees,
yeah, yeah,
Crowley, Lizzie Arnold, like
yeah.
for a country that doesn't have a track, you guys do phenomenally.
Well, when I spoke to a few people about this, certainly around winter sports, I've been very fortunate. I've had a couple of the Jamaican bobsleigh team on as well, and it's that old adage, isn't it? You look at Cool Runnings, and it's like, how do we get Jamaicans to bobsleigh when they don't even have access to snow? But I think now, because you can live anywhere in the world, everything, it's so accessible now, the world, due to flying, whether it be motor vehicle, whatever that might be now, it's so accessible. So there's really not an excuse if it's something that you're interested in. Everything, why shouldn't we have a great team, especially if we're seeing results in the fundings there as well? Um,
Yeah.
so it must be a lot easier now for people to access, or I think.
And I think social media has also played a part in it. Is like there's been quite a few viral moments in the last few years. Like my teammate hit a broom 6 or 7 years ago in the track, and so that went viral. And then people are
Yeah,
like, "Whoa, what's this skeleton thing?" And yeah, there's been a few videos that have gone out on social media that then people who aren't even like in the winter sport world are like, "Oh yeah, that's a sport."
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's been very interesting because I've been involved with skeleton since 2012 to see the evolution and even how much more accessible and how much the technology has evolved since then is wild.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm never going to forget your first day now of skeleton, because I got married on the 2nd of January 2012. So I'll never forget your first day of trying a skeleton now. Um, anyway, I digress. You've done the program, you've started doing the school where you're learning more about the safety, you're learning more about it. Was that the time where now I'm starting to see where the transition might come in? Was that almost where you seen the benefits of figure skating because you were good at using your body weight and changing direction and being able to really, how your body works? Was that something that's really benefited you when you moved to transition into skeleton, because all of a sudden you understand your body so much better, maybe, than other people who are trying this, and I know where my weight needs to be, and I just found it easier to adapt.
That it's so interesting. That's such a good question because if you ask me that, like, I feel like in the time I thought I knew how much I've learned since then. I look back, I'm like, she knew nothing. Um, but like obviously, like, yeah, body awareness is a big thing in figure skating. And so I felt like that transferred over really well, as well as just the skills of like perseverance and like goal setting,
Yeah,
like those simple things of like that piece really are what translated. I had worked, on I had worked with a strength and conditioning coach prior in my figure skating years. So it was easy for me to be like, okay, this is the new goal. And then so I knew how to train and how to apply myself. I just needed someone to tell me
yeah,
how to train for that sport.
of course.
And that was the hard part, was that like the push start is I ran 1 year of track in high school. Like I wish that I had run more.
Yeah,
My coach was not a good person, so I didn't want to, it was just with my high school, and he wasn't very nice because I wasn't on his club team because I was too busy figure skating.
well, yeah,
So I quit, but I wish I would have run more track because we do a lot of sprinting for training and I love sprinting now. I'm not obviously the best sprinter. I wasn't going to go to the Olympics for sprinting, but it took me a long time to pick that piece up because that piece is so integral to
yeah,
applying it to our push start. So I didn't know that piece, but I think I knew how to apply myself. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like, I was like, we all, and it's so interesting because skeleton athletes and bobsleigh athletes come from all different sports. So we all bring
yeah.
this different, like, it factor from our past sport. Mine is just that I'm really stubborn.
Well, honestly, I'm not just saying it. I've just said to my middle daughter, probably within the last 3 days, because she's just began cheerleading, and it's like, talent very rarely out trumps hard work. It's all very good being talented, but you actually have to work for that as well. If you find something too easy, then you tend to take it for granted. Actually, if that's what you want to go and do and you want to get to this level, you're going to have to work hard. But again, probably like your parents, we don't push them if they're not practicing in the house. We're not going to push them to practice because it's just something they enjoy doing. But if it comes to a competition element and they start practicing, we'll invest more in them as well. So very similar to what your parents were like with you.
Yeah.
It has to be that way for me. Skeleton, you've transitioned, you've done the program. What happens after you've went to this school? Is someone then saying to you, we want you to get involved with this as a sport because you've seen there's opportunities there for females within the team, or was it something that you said, how do I now pursue this? I've actually kind of found my call and I love this sport, something I want to be involved with.
It was a bit of both. I definitely was interested in doing it, and what it looked like then was a lot different than it looks like now in Canada, just because the track is closed here in Calgary. So I was in university, so there was no way I was like gonna relocate. I could go up from 7 to 10 p.m. a few days a week and practice and stuff like that. So it also fit really well into my calendar that I was used to like balancing school and sport and all this kind of stuff. So it wasn't unknown to me. So yeah, they kind of had the conversation like, hey, you should come out and just come to there were like development sessions essentially for the next year, and we'll see where things fall. And they made no promises, like, but they were just like, hey, our women's program is like, they were all kind of like this, like trying to make the Olympics and up, and there wasn't really a lot of development there. So they were like, hey, if
Right.
you wait this out, you might get some races kind of in the next few years. Like this is 2012. And then obviously the Sochi Olympics happened in February of 2014. And then it was kind of like, so I was just practicing in Calgary, having fun, doing it recreationally in a sense, like
Yeah, yeah.
truly a hobby, 7 to 10 p.m. a few nights a week. Like it was like my alter ego. And then it all kind of changed in yeah, that November of 2014. Basically, the like association pulled me in and they were like, hey, so we have these open race spots. The first one's coming up. So we have a North American circuit, um, a European circuit, and an Asian. Now we have Asian Cup, but that didn't exist when I was starting. But those are like the two development circuits
Right.
that kind of laddered up to at the time. Then we had like Intercontinental Cup, which was like the mediary between development and World Cup. That
Right.
has since gone away. Now it's just development and World Cup,
Okay.
which is very interesting. But they basically were like, hey, these development races have or these first few have become available. Basically all you have to do is pay us $500 and we've organized everything for you and all this kind
Wow.
of stuff. So I begged my professors to to let me I think I like rearranged some stuff, and I went down to Park City and represented Canada for the first time. So that was like kind of when the opportunities start opening up. Unfortunately, that was also the year we lost all of our government funding. And we've really been recovering since then.
Right. Okay.
So it was good because like I was like, oh well, basically it's a race of who has deeper pockets essentially.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess that was where I really became like my eyes really got open to what is actually available. And then so I raced 8 races that season and then just trained in Calgary between then. And I ended up third overall in the North America's Cup circuit.
Wow.
We were doing the overall awards in Calgary. And I didn't even know they did awards for overall. They called my name and I was like, I don't even know what this is for. And suddenly they're handing me a trophy. And my teammate was first overall. So there's 2 Canadians on the podium and
Oh,
like
wow.
all this stuff. So it's really funny because I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Amazing.
So yeah,
Sometimes that naivety is really nice as well, though, isn't it? Because it kind of you can go to a competition or test yourself without realizing kind of what the end goal is. All of a sudden it's like, oh, and I think that's quite nice sometimes when you enter a competition or something and you maybe you do enter with an element of naivety because you don't put that added pressure on yourself. You're more relaxed when you go into these situations because it just sounds from the way you're talking is you're just really enjoying yourself and you were just enjoying the opportunity that you were presented with.
yeah, that was totally it. I just was like, oh, this is really cool. But that year really got me hooked. Like, I was like, this is so cool. Like, I'm representing Canada. Like,
Big
suddenly
moment.
something I've aspired to do my entire life just happened so quickly, and that that to me is wild. I still sometimes I think I have a bit of imposter syndrome accepting these things because I was like so I say like because I was so mediocre as a kid that suddenly you're like, wait, I actually did win a bronze medal at our national
Yeah,
championships.
yeah.
I'm like,
It's amazing.
that one fully hasn't sunk in yet.
It's yeah,
So
it's really interesting because how many people can say they've represented their country, or how many people can say they've won a national medal or an international medal? It probably gets lost because you come back and you. My sport was the same, so my sport isn't funded. I did like a sport karate kickboxing, and so my medals are here behind me. They've only been on that wall for maybe two or 3 years. I'd kind of put them in a bag and forgot about them. And it wasn't until I was on a podcast having a conversation about them, and it was actually there should be a real pride about that, just because it's not known to the outside world because you can walk around and nobody has a clue who you are. But actually, within your world and within your sport, people will go, well, there's a bit of a target on that back now, or that's a bronze medalist. That's who I want to be. And the people do look up to you within the sport. And I think it's really, really nice that you've highlighted that, but that imposter syndrome as well, because, you talk about, I think sometimes we as athletes almost devalue our sport because it's not recognized by the government or isn't funded. But actually, that's just unfortunate that's a sport we chose to pursue. And who cares? It's actually, I think it's probably more commendable that we managed to work full-time jobs, still train and compete at such a high level and win medals when we're not funded. I think how good we could have been, or what we could have achieved, or what you can achieve, because obviously you're still competing, so what you could achieve if that funding was there. I think it changes the whole perspective of things.
yeah, it certainly does, and that's where I find myself now is, I've had some essences of like little bones of funding thrown my way, or like people that are targeted, identified in our sport are funded, and they deserve that. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
never been one to be like,
No?
but in Canada it has to be so targeted because we have so many sports, and so they really need to look at like what do we have a potential meddling in. But what our association does really well is they spend the money in the best places that it like can benefit the whole
Yeah.
program. Like an example is I'm traveling amongst the senior team this year, so like our top two athletes in Canada,
Wow.
who one is the world champion in on the women's side, and the other is a two-time Olympian. And so I got the opportunity to join that team for preseason and then for some races in Asia this year. And
Wow.
I was like, well, yeah, basically I want to shadow the senior team. And
Yeah.
so not just say that like I'm still paying upwards of $15,000 to go to these races, but part of the like coaching and like that piece is funded because the coaches are going with the targeted athletes.
Yeah, of
Is kind of
course.
how our program has done a really great job of trying to make every dollar work. But these are athletes that also are being funded by the government and stuff like that. And I am not receiving that, which is totally fine. I've come to peace with that. But like
Yeah.
I'm basically paying to be a professional athlete, but I also have and they also both work and are university students. It's never a knock against those that are
No, no.
identified. They didn't choose to be identified. They've earned it.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
so that's definitely something I was angry about for a while in my career, but I'm at the point now leading into the pre-Olympic season, like the next 18 months are, obviously the goal is to go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Do I know I'm going to make it? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
but how else do you have to go all in.
You have to
So,
try. Yeah.
so
100%.
yeah, so I'm up against like my season will probably cost me $40,000 and I work full time. And I also manage, I call myself the CEO of Team Dafoe because I'm just marketing myself. I'm signing sponsors. I'm on podcasts, like, but this is like my second hobby in amongst the skeleton and stuff like that. So anyways, it's interesting. I like that because it truly showcases like the love of the sport. I'm not in it for the clout or for the accolades. Yeah.
It's something that has come up on numerous occasions, and obviously having been one of those competitors who had to self-fund and get sponsors and whatnot, I understand how hard it is, but I also think as I say, in some ways, I think it's more impressive that people can reach these levels whilst having to raise money or whatever it may be. And I'm probably very like you when I was younger. You get a little bit disheartened and you try and raise this. And this was before social media because I've got about 10 year on you. So I've this was before, well, just as phones were coming out and whatnot. You know, I sound like really old there. I'm not. Um, but it's an investment, and I think that's one of the things that's coming across really well is yes, you're talking about how much it costs, but I don't feel like the word costs being used. I do feel like it's a $40,000 investment because there's an opportunity, whether it be slim, whether it be really close to it, there's an opportunity to go to the Olympics. That's an investment. So I think it's a great message that you're sending across to people. Actually, really good.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely Beijing was the first Olympic year. I woke up to an email, and I promise I'll get to where this is coming from in my brain, but I woke up to an email in May of 2021. So like lockdown,
Yeah,
essentially
yeah,
we were in another lockdown. I actually had COVID when I got this email. And it's like, hey, you've been longlisted for the 2022 Olympic Games, which essentially means they submit everyone who's eligible. But that was like a moment where I was like, wow, I was even like considered for the Olympic team. I obviously too being in the midst of the pandemic, I think they were extra safe. They literally submitted every woman who had more than 2 years sledding experience in Canada because they were like, what if the
yeah,
top three all like we have to send someone? So,
yeah,
but that was really cool because it was like I ended that season. We're doing our national ranks different now, but like I essentially, if you look down the international standings, I was like the fifth Canadian woman, and they
wow,
took the top two to the Olympics, and I was like, wow, I was actually pretty close. And
yeah,
so now like this year I've gotten the opportunity, like I said, to travel with the senior team, and I'm doing a few World Cup races. Um,
amazing.
you
Well,
heard it here
I
first.
suppose those things don't.
I don't think I fully announced that publicly, so this is an exclusive, but yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, no, I'm like you give all the exclusives. I'm loving that. I was going to say those moments, those little things that yeah, or maybe it's in your head the aspirations have been. I'd love to compete at the Olympics because I love the Olympics. Have they ever really felt achievable? Maybe it's not because it's something like you internalize, but as soon as someone then plants that seed or gives that little bit of hope, it lights a fire in you, and all of a sudden it's wow, what am I going to do? And have you found that's what happened for you in this 4 year cycle? Actually, that really lit a flame within me because I didn't realize how close I was to, top five's massive. So to be that close, has that really sparked something within you to go, now we're moving into the next 18 months prelims towards Olympics? Whether or not you think you can get there or not, has it lit something in you to go, well, I'm going to push myself to really make those top two feel that I'm coming for their spaces?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because I think what I've found is like everyone talks about the Olympics, but like my Olympics was actually getting a World Cup race in January. Like, and that sounds so silly, but I worked for 12 years, and the amount of people that told me that I wasn't going to be good enough, I wasn't going to make the national program, I made the national program, like all this stuff. And then we have really great coaches now, and it's really about the day in, day out process of enjoying it is what I find. And like that leads to the successes. So while I'm trying to be like, yeah, the Olympics are coming, I do have a shot. I'm not like focusing like obviously when I'm talking to people about my sport, I'm going to bring it up because it's a
Of
hot
course.
topic. It's a great way to market what my journey looks like in the next 18 months, but there's so many milestones along that way, and big goals like the Olympics didn't seem possible for a long time. And even then I still struggle with if they are possible, just like my realistic brain. But then I remember that I got offered, these handful of almost a full World Cup race
Yeah.
schedule this year.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's been my goal forever. So like even if that's it, that's okay. Like you're okay to walk away. And I have lots of great athlete friends here that really have not made Olympic teams, that have made Olympic teams, that have quit mid-Olympic cycle just because it costs too much. Like, and
Yeah.
if there's anything I've learned, it's like the Olympics just don't define you. Obviously, they're great and they're great experience, but I have friends that are just as happy that pursued their sport at a national level and got what they
100%.
wanted out of it, achieved their goals, and they're successful in their careers now. The reality is in Calgary, like athletes are dime a dozen. Really, even like you'll walk by downtown and I know who they are. I'm like, that person is an Olympic medalist. That person is an Olympian, like blah, blah. But people aren't like fawning over them in the
Yeah,
streets
yeah, of
here.
course.
They're just working their corporate job. Like, so I think like for me that perspective has been so refreshing because it's like going to the Olympics isn't going to change my life. Of course, it's a goal, and yeah, of course it's a goal. And do I know if I'm going to make it? Like yeah, I don't know, but I really would like to try everything to
Yeah,
make it because I've come this far. But I really think just the motivation comes from that day in, day out, consistent effort, showing up, going to the races that I've been allocated, even if like, and that's really what the amount of North American Cup races I've raced where I'm like, I should be moving up here, but I'm still racing North America's Cup. But then I look at how that all benefited me when I
yeah,
loaded onto my sled in the World Cup and I was like, oh, this is just sliding. Like, it's just sliding. It's not anything different. There's cameras, but like you don't notice the cameras when you're sliding. So yeah, anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying that like, well, it's a goal. It's certainly I've come to peace that I'm going to be okay if I don't go. I had a dream last night that I've actually had two dreams about the Olympics since the summer games have come on. And one was me about to play a beach volleyball match, which is very interesting. And I was with my physio and I was bawling my eyes out because I was so nervous. And she gave me this big pump up speech about how good I was. And so I went and saw her the next day. I was like, I had a dream about you last night. You were giving me this pump up speech. And then I actually had a dream last night that I was just like casually sauntering somewhere and they were like, hey, Grace, congrats. And then I was like, huh, I'm an Olympian now. And then I just kept walking, and then I ended up in some arcade. It was a weird dream, but anyway.
you
That
might
being
be
said,
manifesting the dream, manifesting it.
but like to me, what I took, and I'm very like philosophical about dreams, but like, what I took from that is like, it's not gonna change my life. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
well,
we'll stop harping on that now. But
no, it kind of, it's actually because you've been talking about the World Cup and whatnot. What was it like competing in your first World Cup race? What, you talk about that jump up. You think you want to be doing more than North America's Cup. What's the jump like from those international competitions that you've been doing at as you described, development level, to all of a sudden being on the circuit against elite? If that's fair to say.
no, that's definitely fair to say. I think what one opportunity I've had that I've been very lucky in Canada is to have such a strong women's program.
Yeah.
And so like last season our preseason, I was, with my two female teammates who like one is the one, they're both very excellent sliders
Yeah,
and
yeah,
both excellent pushers. So I measure myself against them every day.
yeah.
Every time we're training. So I
Good
think
place
it's
to be.
yeah, because like some days I'm like, oh man, like I'm 2 seconds back. But then I remember that like they've won World Cup medals and world champion, like
Yeah, yeah.
that you're like, oh, like that's actually not a terrible place to be. So it was really interesting. I had known, so in December I was in Oldenburg, Germany, and our head coach called me the night before and was like, hey, I just wanted to check in. Like he ran a bunch of numbers and was like, I have a target in mind for you. Go out and slide your best tomorrow. But if you slide well and you hit this target, you're probably going to get this World Cup opportunity in January.
Wow.
And I went out and had probably like the best race of my life. Maybe well, so
Interesting.
the World Cup was a bit better, I would say, but like at that moment, the best race of my life. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually beat a couple women who had been on the World Cup on other tracks and also different because like my development, they were there to learn the track and
Yeah.
like hone their skills. So that was more of a training week for some of those athletes, I'm sure. But like getting beat by me probably wasn't in their cards. But they're not going home and thinking about that. They're going home and thinking about the World Cup that was going to be there
Yeah,
in
yeah, of
in
course.
8 weeks. So, but I ended up meeting that target, and yeah, over Christmas I got a text slash call from our head coach, and he's been a personal coach of mine for the last 3 or 4 years. So, we know each other really well, and very lucky that he's with the national program.
Yeah.
But basically, it's like, so if I offered you the World Cup in St. Moritz, would you say yes? And I said yes.
Yeah, let me think.
It, granted, this is on like Christmas Day, I think,
Oh,
or
yeah.
Boxing Day.
What
I
a
can't remember
present.
what day it was. And I left on January 2nd, which
Amazing.
was also 12 years since I tried skeleton for the
Amazing.
first time.
Ah,
So I got on a plane to head to Switzerland. But yeah, I think anyways, it was really interesting because it happened so quickly. I didn't have time to stress over it.
yeah,
But I was also very lucky to have amazing teammates who like really showed me the ropes of what's different. But then like also being like, hey, we're the people you train with. You just spent 3 weeks with us in Whistler at the start of the year. Like, we got your back, and it's my
yeah,
same coach. Like, it really wasn't all that different. I think it was really cool just to see, like, I'm sitting in the change room and we were with the German team, and like the German team has Olympic medalists, world championship
yeah, yeah,
medalists, like world champions and stuff like that. And I really think it's people. Like, I think that's
yeah,
part of it. You like watch them on TV and they're like idolize them, but then you're hanging out and they're just like laughing in the change room and like they're just people too. So
yeah.
it really made things more human, I think, for me. And yeah, it was interesting. I ended up racing fairly well there, and I'd say that was the race of my life because there was 32 athletes, and so we go off 1 to 32, and I
Yeah.
was 31st down the track. So that's what they really expect that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
place
of course.
31st, and I ended up placing 25th, and making the second heat. So only the top 25
Oh
get a
wow.
second heat, and so that was my goal. And it was by like literally like hundredths of a second. And they cut to my coaches in the coaches box, and they're like, like clapping because right up until the final curve, they're like, oh, looks like she's not gonna make the cut, blah blah blah. I go through the line and like, oh, she's bumped out
Wow.
whoever was in 26th or in 25th place. She's made the cut, and there was only one more athlete. So yeah, I think there. Anyways, it was really interesting just
Big
to see.
achievement.
Yeah, but like also, I kind of realized, and I don't mean to say this in a cocky way, but like I do belong there in a sense. I have to work
Yeah.
hard and like, to still make that top 25 when there's 35 athletes and stuff. There's lots of talented female skeleton racers in the world, but um yeah, it really did like teach me that, like it's not unreasonable
Yeah,
to
you
be there.
belong there, yeah. You
Yeah,
qualified, yeah.
it's not like I'm not the ray gun of skeleton.
Yeah.
I'll say that of the breakdancing just because she still made the Olympics. Hey, no knock.
She's hey, she's
But
probably the most famous person out of it.
she's still vacationing in Paris, last I heard, so good for her.
Yeah,
Um,
fair
but
play. Fair
anyways, I
play.
digress that like I did belong there. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's the one thing I've learned. And to go from being someone who was told I was never going to make the national program, why are you starting this sport, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah,
to racing a World Cup race in 12 years was pretty cool.
yeah, it's phenomenal. There's one thing that you spoke about that really stood out to me, and it's something that I suppose I'd like you to try and explain a little bit further. Was those situations you've had a phone call to say if you make a specific time, maybe you haven't been told at the time, but there's a good opportunity that you're almost going to realize a life's ambition was to qualify for that World Cup, and you haven't caved in under the pressure of that. You've almost embraced that and was like, okay, and you've just said I like had one of my best races. What is your coping mechanism for that, or is it something that you can't explain because it's just the way you are for your nature?
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I have caved under the pressure before. I think every person has at some point, every athlete has at some point. I remember freaking out a little bit. I was in the middle of my sled prep too, so like prepping my equipment, and then I was like, I better get this equipment. Like, not that I don't do it every time, but it
Yeah,
is like 110%. Every piece of tape, like hundreds of seconds
yeah,
matter.
yeah.
Everything. My runner's polished to perfection. I left it, and I turned on this. I really like the Calm app, and so there's one. It's something about like high performance. I can't remember. I searched up like athlete or sport, and this one came up, and it was like a 20-minute like I can't remember what it's called. Something about achieving your high performance or something
Okay.
like that. Anyways, I listened to that. I laid with my legs up on the couch. I was like, I better recover these legs. I need to push hundreds of seconds faster. Because Altenburg, we were in Altenburg, and it's also one of the longest push starts. And
Right.
so it feels like a marathon. Um, and your legs are just like, when you want to stop, there's still like another two
So
cycles before you reach the crest. And then you start your overspeed. So I was like, okay, like I gotta give it all
yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah,
Um, I think what like really mattered was like also the conversation that I had with my coach was very like, he acknowledged that he was like, I wasn't sure if I wanted to tell you,
Yeah.
like, but at the end of the day, he goes, I decided to tell you. And we also got the chance to like just connect on like how things have gone so far that season, because he had been with the senior team and I had been with the development team. And like that was on our relationship that we had built, I think, and are building, but like it was a vote of confidence. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I had been waiting for so long in my career. I always felt like the coaches were like not going against me, but like I was there, but they weren't like, they didn't truly believe in me. We've had a lot of coaches come in and out of my career in Canada. And so that kind of like also really helped. I'm just pulling up because I also this year I started writing like notes to myself on my phone. And so it's like if I get
Amazing.
really nervous, I can like start to like think about it. So um this was between runs because I went out and I also had an early start draw in this race and the ice frosted up. So things were just on my side. I've
Yeah,
been on
yeah,
the other end of that and been on the frostiest track on earth and come like almost dead last. Like it happens.
yeah.
But this one I came out and I kept like, I was early and I kept seeing people go underneath me and underneath me. I'm like, oh, that's weird. That's weird. And so I was sitting eighth after the first run. And so I wrote a note to
Right.
myself and I said, remember this feeling. Whatever happens next, it's going to be okay. You can handle anything, is what I said. Because I
Right.
wanted to know that if I imploded and had a terrible run the second run, just know that like I do have it in me and I'll get another opportunity is
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of how I was framing it. Um, so I think like that's my way of like kind of coping a little bit. Yeah, I don't know, just many years, I guess, too, of rising to the occasion when no one has put pressure on me. It kind of was like I we say in my and I'll censor it, but my mom says that we're effing copers in my family. And that's kind of like when things get
Center.
thrown your way, you
Yeah.
you so in that moment I was like, oh, like this is easy. I can, and I didn't know what the target was, but I just was like, I'll just execute my game plan. And I had the best run I've ever had in that track, which is Altenburg is a track that is a little, I don't know if any of the bobsledders you've had on have talked about Altenburg, but it's a beast of a track.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's a couple corners that can flip you, and
Right.
and it has a Kreisel, so that's a 360-degree
Oh,
corner.
wow.
So you enter, you go around, there's three pressures, and you exit underneath. If you stand, like you'll see someone come out underneath you and go through the track. So
Wow.
it's one of the most tricky track features because you can get very disoriented where you
Yeah.
are. And the pressures also pick you up. So you come in and you're like, okay, you have to steer or else you're gonna hit the roof, and then you're gonna bottom out and you're gonna get close to the roof again, bottom out, and then you get close to the roof, and then you're gonna exit the corner. So
Yeah. It
it's
sounds
very
great.
yeah, so you have obviously smooth it out, but if you went in and did nothing, you would hit the roof three times and hit the belly three times probably. So
Wow.
anyways,
Wow.
it's just a track that is it has some nicknames, Alton
Yeah.
Smash, Alton, like stuff like that. That all these tracks have personalities that become known on tour. So anyways, long story short, I don't know. It's just who I am, I guess. Like, and I also knew that if I failed, great. Well, so what? Like, I've
Yeah.
failed so many times. I'll go back to working my job. Like that. I think that's the thing is like the last few years have really been borrowed. I don't want to say borrowed time, but like extra time. They've been a gift because I thought I was going to retire after 2018, and then I kept
Right.
going. I thought I was going to retire after 2022. Our
So good.
organization was a disaster in 2021, 22,
Right.
23. And now we finally have like good coaching, proper leadership, and like stuff like that. So this has all been like just such a gift because when you remove the stressors of like all these like governance, we were
Yeah.
stressing
Yeah.
about governance and like and stuff like that. And mismanagement of finances. And anyways, I won't get too deep into that, but I think like now it's like so freeing. You're like, I don't really have to worry. I just have to
Yeah.
pay a bill.
Yeah.
Great. The
Yeah.
amount of times that I've gotten told that I had to book my own accommodation and flight and find my own coach for a race in 6 days, and I did
Wow.
all that. Um,
Yeah. It's like a lease of life, isn't it? A new lease of life now, a bit of freedom where you can actually just enjoy the sport for what it is.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that's really lent itself to also my success. my more recent success is just like,
Mm.
hey, when I'm not worrying about 15 other things and I focus on the task at hand, I can perform well.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose it kind of it leads us on to sort of wrapping things up because I'm conscious I've taken up over an hour of your time already. But aspirations for the future very much is to compete the World Cup over this coming season and push yourself towards seeing what you can achieve with regards to Olympic Games.
Yeah, definitely. So this season, I'm very much focused on, I take it season by season because I feel like sometimes it gets overwhelming. You know, you think of a whole quad,
Yeah, of
like
course.
it can get overwhelming of thinking of that. And I guess like for me, I think of it like a season by season commitment. And I don't mean that in a half in, half out way, but I
Yeah,
just really need to focus on what the goals are this year. And the goal is to, yeah, just embrace all my opportunities, slide the World Cup races, and I'll be racing in some other Asian Cup and North American Cup races as well. But very much just see what happens there and just be open. I'm not trying to like put a determined path on what it is. And at the end of next year, I'll decide what, we do debriefs with our coaches, and we did it this year. And so they were like, they graphed out. They're like, hey, like you improved X% in
right.
your time back from the leader. And to me, that was a signal of why would I quit now? I've improved this year. Like if they sat me
100%.
down and they're like, hey, you plateaued or hey, you got worse, like that's to me when the conversation happens. No matter how much money I spend next year, is it going to be worth it? Like
Yeah,
that kind of piece. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. And I think just being open to that and open to all possibilities. But I definitely would like to also just, this is weird to say, but like enjoy an Olympic year. And it's like, because I feel like everyone else, a lot of people are very stressed. And like when I was a part of it in Beijing, like the Beijing Olympic year was really different because we were traveling and travel was still locked down. So like
yeah,
that was extra stressful for everyone. We were quarantining in weird places. Like that was just a weird year. I think not having any expectations like kind of lends itself to just sliding really free and seeing what happens. And one of my first strength coaches in skeleton, I started with him in 2014 before he moved out of the strength and conditioning business, but he basically was always like, and he went to the 2006 Olympics.
right.
Um, and he always was like, someone will remove themselves because they get injured. Someone will remove themselves because they like mentally can't handle it.
Yeah,
And and then there's all these other circumstances. He's like, just don't be the person that falls into those, and
yeah,
you'll really like be able to see what happens. And I by no means say that I'm like hoping that it happens to people. I want us to send
yeah,
the best team.
of course.
Um, and I want to see all the best athletes, in my sport go. But it's kind of like you just open up to the possibility of like, hey, if I'm fourth in Canada or third in Canada at that time,
Yeah,
at
of
least I'm
course.
in conversation. And I guess I'll find
Have,
out.
have
I
to
guess
be in
I'll
it.
find out soon. If I'm on this long list or whatever, and I fill
Yeah,
out all my credentials and stuff. But I guess if I don't get my email, that's a signal that I should pack it in. But
yeah,
anyways, yeah, I really just think like it's just everything's a gift. Every race I get is I'm just trying to enjoy it. And enjoy my last few months, I say, because like 18 more months until the Winter Olympics, I think, or
yeah.
17 now. And I think that's the end for me, and I have come to terms with that. Just because I've been an athlete for a long time, and
Very long, yeah. The
yeah,
longevity of it's fantastic, and we know as athletes as well, don't we? We know that you're going to get to a point where you, well, one, your body's probably not going to perform the way you want it to anymore, or two, there's people who are coming through who are going to start taking those spots as well, and sometimes it's probably a little bit easier for people who do fund themselves to accept it rather than those people who are paid professionals constantly. That's my belief. I never really
yeah,
struggled with it.
it's I've seen this happen in the British program in the flying sports. Is like they're so well funded, but it is so cutthroat and it's
Yeah,
so stressful. And they get sat down in meetings and basically told, "You're out. You don't have a choice. You're out." And
yeah,
um, to me, I've seen a few people that I've known through the British program that happened to, and it, the times that I wished for funding, I was always like, there's a flip side. And every
Yeah.
time I heard that flip side, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because
Night and
that's
day,
also not what I want.
of course.
Because someone would have told me 10 years ago, and I never would have raced a World Cup and done everything, and
Yeah.
not only my accolades, but become who I am in life. Like, this has very much shaped something I've done all my 20s, and now I'm in my 30s. And I say it's a heck of a story. That
It is.
I basically want to write the last few chapters here and then move on and stuff like that, and be able to tell these, when I was 25 and racing in St. Moritz, this happened, and people be like, what?
Yeah, it's
Who
amazing.
is this person?
It is.
Like,
Even now it is though. Even now it's a phenomenal story. But once you close that door and begin the next chapter in your life, it's something amazing to reflect back on, and the opportunities that present themselves and what you've earned. Last thing, that if you're going to give someone a piece of advice, whether it be your younger self, whether it be just anybody, what would that be?
That's a tough one. Yeah, there's lots of pieces, but I think, like, don't limit yourself, and don't let others limit you, because, like, as I've mentioned, a lot of pieces in my career have been shaped by people telling me no, and the stubborn person in me has then turned around and been like, okay, then watch me.
Yeah.
And so I would say that that would be a really good piece of advice, is don't limit yourself, but also, we touched on this earlier, but like, those around you can't want it more. Your coaches can't want it more than you. Your parents can't want it more than you. Like, but if you show that you're interested, the people around you are going to rally around you. It's very much, I've really realized that. I did not envision that in my 30s, my parents would still I'd be calling them to book me flights to races on points and, like, stuff like that. But people, and the most random people, will rally around you too. Like, these people will come out of the woodwork, and in the best way. But, like, my childhood babysitter donated something to a silent auction that I ran last year. She babysat me. She was my neighbor for the first, like, 6 years of my life, and she runs a business here in Calgary. And
Wow.
It's kind of like those pieces that are really cool to be like, so people are going to rally around you and help you, and be open to that. And, like, don't be afraid to ask for help is another piece. Is, like, there's lots of times that I've been very vulnerable on social media, and like the post that you saw, an example, I always qualm about whether I should post something like that, because it seems like money grabby, or like, well, what was me? Like, there are lots of other hard things going on in the world.
Yeah.
I know that. I know sport is frivolous. But like, someone chooses to donate $5 or $10 to your campaign, they bought you a coffee, essentially. It can add up. And I very much have seen just the impact that, I can provide back to the community. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and be vulnerable. So this has been a very reflective hour. I feel like this is a good way to start the day, is like, a reflection is a big piece of how I get my gratitude. So being able to talk about my story and, like, reflect is like,
nice.
Kind of cool.
Oh, good. Oh, well, I'm pleased. Grace, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I've enjoyed listening to you reflect.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for reaching out, and thanks for having me on. And I hope some people learned about skeleton.
I have. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, and you can find me, just search my name, Grace Dafoe, Dafoe.
Put them on the socials as well.
Or Threads, or whatever social media you want. GraceDafoe.ca is my website. If you Google me, chances are most of the stuff that comes up is about me. There's like one person from the 1950s that has the same name, but other than that, everything else is about me. Anyways, thank you so much. This has been great.
So fantastic.